Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today, let's make a pie. Placemat pies. And to start with, we're going to need the pan to cook the pie in. And it is going to be a brown flannel. The flannel is going to work as a background and the batting or the fill inside the pie. Next, we're going to need to make the crust. And the crust is going to be a ultra suede. And this is a fabric that looks like suede. It has that soft suede look to it. And if you have a pair of pinking shears or a rotary cutter that does pinking shears, it will look really nice. And of course, thread to match the pie crust. And you can also add in a heat and bond or some kind of a fusible web. It can either be in the long strips or the large piece. We're going to need to make the pie shape. And to do that, I'm just going to use a very large plate, and in this case, it's a charger. And with the large placemat, I want to make little coasters. I have a set of 5 different circles from Creative Grids. I'll use one of these sizes, and you can use any size to make the coaster. And because you're going to be going through a lot of fabric all at the same time, you can either use the Schmetz 9014 quilting needle or the top stitch needle. You're just going to need a good strong needle for this. And of course, last but not least, is the fruit filling to go inside of the pies. So we have cherry, apple, blueberry, and of course you can never go wrong with a mixed berry pie. This fruit fabric is from Timeless Treasures. I'm going to make all of the pies square first. Then you're going to be able to use the large circle to cut it out. The first thing you're going to need though is to determine the size of the square. So put your large plate down, or anything that's the circular shape that you're going to be using, and leave a little bit around the outside and just cut it in a square. It does not have to be exact because we're going to trim it off after. And do the same thing for the smaller shape. Now I happen to be using the 5.5-inch circle. So I have 4 pieces of flannel larger than the circle for the coaster and 4 larger for the placemat size. The pie fillings now need to go into the crust. Take one of the pie fillings and iron it right on top of the flannel. Make sure the good side is facing down and the good side of the fabric is facing up. And just iron these together. If you use a little bit of starch in between the 2 layers, they just sort of stick all on their own. And you're going to do the same thing with the little coasters. Pin your pie filling and your flannel together. Next, I'm going to draw a circle. I'm not going to draw tight around the circle. I'm going to draw along the outside. And it's just going to be a guideline. All of it's going to be cut off so you can use a permanent marker. Now you're going to have an idea on where everything is going to fit. And do the same thing to the little coasters. The crust is going to be made from this faux suede or an ultra suede. And this is where the 2-sided fusible web is going to come in handy. So you're going to just press this paper onto the back side of the fabric. What's going to happen is that heat is going to transfer that glue onto that fabric. There are so many different fusible webs on the market. Be sure to use the directions for your fusible web. And once the 2 are fused together, when you peel that paper off, the glue is going to be on the wrong side. Now you can take the paper off at this point or take it off later, whatever you feel more comfortable at doing. So what you're going to do now is make the lattice of the pie crust. If you have a rotary cutter that happens to have the pinking shear on it, you can definitely use that now. If not, pinking shears will work just fine. And I don't necessarily want to measure because I want the pie crust to seem a little bit irregular. So I am just going to start and cut the first edge off right close along that fusible web, and then I can discard this. I want to make sure that the measurement is going to be the largest part of the pie. So I know this is going to be long enough. Some I can have smaller, but I like to make sure that I start with a long enough piece. And just cut this all into strips. What size? Well, it depends on what size you want your crust. I'm not going to use any size in particular. I'm just going to be cutting long strips. That's going to be the lattice to the pie crust. So you can go as thin as you like or as thick as you like and cut a whole pile of these. If you have the long strips of the fusible web, you could put them on after you cut them. With these long strips, I now can make my lattice. So if you haven't taken the paper off, now's the time to do it. And I'm going to lay all of these thin little lattice strips on top of my pie, just as if I was going to make a pie. By having that circle drawn on top of this, you'll know exactly where to put that pie crust so that you know you've not gone in to the pie. Now this is easier if you take this to the ironing board and do this right on top of the ironing board so you don't have to pick it up and move it. Once you have this on the way you want it, you're going to be able to press and fuse all of these strips right on top of that fabric. And all the extras you can cut off. And those little pieces you probably will be able to use for your little coaster. So go around and cut off all of the long pieces that are not inside of that mark. Give it a good press so all of that glue sticks. Set up your machine so that the top thread is going to match the pie crust and the bottom thread is going to match that bottom flannel. Now you're going to be able to just stitch down each one of these lattices. Now if you've done them wide, you can go on each side. If you've done them narrow, you can just go right down the center. However you want to do it is fine. And you're going to be stitching through all 3 layers. So you can see my squares are not the same, and even the pie crust is not the same. I have decided to stitch down both sides, and because I knew I was going to cut all this off, I was just able to stitch and then travel down, stitch back, and keep traveling until all of my lines were double stitched. Now I have all 3 layers stitched together. The next thing we're going to do is draw a circle around our plate. Now, if you do not want to use whatever circle or dinnerware you've done, you can make yourself a template. And put this template on and trace all the way around that circle. This second line is just going to give you a line where to place that outside pie crust. Now, you could just cut a big circle and then cut out the center and put that whole piece on top, but that's going to waste a lot of fabric from that center. So another way of doing it is taking a strip about 2 inches, and I like to cut it anywhere between 4 and 5 inches because I'm going to place those fatter pieces along the outside. And as you put them down, it's going to cause a circular shape. Keep your crust inside because you're going to trim this off after. So just keep placing those fatter wide pieces all the way around. Again, this is something, if you do it right at the iron, you won't have to pick this up and move it. So all of the outside crust is now been fused on. We can take the template, place it down, and to cut the outside, you can just use plain scissors, and you can just sort of curve as you're cutting. So you see how I've just kind of done a curve coming in and out all the way around, and it doesn't have to be exact. Take your machine and use the same thread setup that you had for the lattice and just do a couple of irregular rows of stitching all the way around. You can swerve in and out because you're going to want to make it look like that crust has been all crunched around the edge. I just kept moving the machine until I covered that area. Put your pie aside, and now you can do your other pies and your little coasters. Coasters, I'm going to do the same thing. Just put a couple of little lattices down the centers And because the little coaster is a lot smaller, you won't have as much to waste. So you can actually draw the size of the circle that you want. Cut it out a little bit around the outside. You can go in and cut the outside. So once you start it, you can just cut around that pie crust. And again, I'm not measuring. I can now put that on and see if I like it. If I want a smaller pie crust, I can cut a little bit smaller inside of that circle. Peel off the paper and fuse your pie crust down. So you're going to continue to make the little ones exactly the same as you did the big one. Just cut an irregular shape and stitch. And before you put your pies on the table, you need to do one more thing. Just do a small zigzag all the way around the outside. That's going to hold all those layers together. So when you go to wash it, they're going to stay nice. You do not have to do any binding at all. So there's no set inseams, no binding. They're nice and flat so that the dishes can sit right on them. How fun for a picnic. So now we have our pies and tarts ready for the dinner table. No flour, no dirty dishes, and no mess in the kitchen. That's the kind of baking I like to do. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.